Is your sewing machine making stitches like this? Let me tell you a secret. All sewing machines, from ones that have the bobbin underneath like this, to ones who have the bobbin like this, from ones that are computerized to ones that don't even use electricity, all make a stitch the exact same way. There's a top or needle thread and a bottom or bobbin thread, and the needle takes the needle thread down through the fabric and wraps it around the bobbin thread. Let's pretend that these two pieces of cardboard are two pieces of fabric and they're being sewn together with a top thread and a bobbin thread down here. The needle takes the top needle thread down through both layers of fabric. It wraps the needle thread around the bobbin thread and then brings that needle thread back up to the top again. And as the needle thread gets pulled up to the top, it actually brings the bobbin thread up in between the two layers of fabric. So these interlocking bits are in between the two layers of fabric. This is called a lock stitch because they are interlocking here. If the interlocking bit is in between the two layers of the fabric, you won't see any of the bobbin thread on top or any of the needle thread on the bottom. Your stitch will look like this. It'll have nothing from one side on the other side. But if this top or needle thread pulls too hard, it can pull the bobbin thread right up to the top. It'll be showing on the top of the fabric. It might show up as little bumps or even big loops. And in something like a zigzag stitch, it would look like this. On the other hand, if this needle thread doesn't pull hard enough, it will leave this down on the bottom, leaving needle thread on the bottom. That can show up like loops like this, or again, even just like little dots. Seams like this with just the little dots are very easy to pull out because threads aren't interlocked in between the fabric. How hard this thread is being pulled is controlled by the tension discs on the machine. Tension discs look like this on older machines, and you adjust them by turning the knob. On newer machines, they're usually here, and you adjust them with something like this. Some newer machines, you cannot even see the tension discs, but the adjustment is right here. All those tension discs are doing is squeezing the thread harder or loosely, and the harder it squeezes the thread, the harder the thread is going to be pulled. And I'm sure you're thinking by now, just tell me which direction to turn the tension dial, right? You're smarter than that. It's important to understand before you touch that tension dial that the discs are only controlling the tension on the thread if the thread is flowing smoothly through everything else on the path, both up here and in the bobbin. Why? Well, if something isn't threaded right, or the thread is getting hung up on something that makes it harder for the machine to pull that thread off the spool, that's going to increase the tension on the thread regardless of what the tension dials are set for. And of course, if you don't have the tension discs threaded properly, it's really, really important to have this presser foot up when you're threading the tension discs. If they aren't threaded properly, they can't put any tension on the thread. That's why if you suddenly have tension issues, the first thing to do is to rethread your machine, both the needle and the bobbin. Because if you didn't touch the tension dial and your stitches have changed, it's not that the tension discs magically adjusted themselves, right? It's more likely that something came unthreaded or something's getting caught somewhere, like maybe even in that mess of lint that you need to clean out around the bobbin. If you're sure that both your needle thread and your bobbin thread are threaded correctly and everything is nice and clean, then you can experiment with adjusting your tension. Give you a little tip. This is usually not in the middle of a project where you're using the same thread and the same fabric. This is usually when you've changed to drastically different fabric or you're using a new thread. The first step in adjusting your tension is to write down the number where it was. Because if you play with the tension and it doesn't solve the problem, it's probably something else, and you're going to want to put that tension dial right where you started. The next step is to decide whether you want to try raising the tension or lowering the tension. Higher numbers mean more tension or more pull on the needle thread, and lower numbers mean less tension or less pull on the needle thread. Remember, if the needle thread is pulling too hard, it will pull the bobbin up to the top. It will look like this on the top of your fabric. So you'll need to lower the pull or tension on the needle thread, and you do this by lowering to a lower number. And you really only want to do it a little bit at a time. Adjust, try sewing again. If it doesn't work, adjust a little bit more, try sewing again. If the needle thread is not pulling hard enough and it can't pull the thread up between the layers, then you'll have needle thread showing on the bottom. It will look like loops or even just little dots on the bottom of your fabric. And in that case, you'll want to give it more pull. You'll want to increase the tension just a little bit at a time, testing as you make each adjustment. That's the basics and the reasons why you might have tension issues like this. There are lots of other things in using your machine that can affect the stitches that have nothing to do with tension. That's why I have a whole course dedicated to teaching you how your machine works. That way you'll be able to fix it without feeling like you're screwing something up. I take you step by step and explain how each part works and what it's there for on your machine, in even more detail than this video, because I don't want you to lose creative time wondering what's wrong with your machine, trying to fix it, and pulling your hair out. That's not a fun way to sew, right? Check out the course in the links below, and as always, happy sewing!